Got a tiny microphone. I know everyone has like collectively decided that they hate these things. I don't. I love them. I love tiny things. I think they're hilarious, and this makes it easier for me to film videos. So hopefully it's funny for you too. If it's not and you also can't hear me, please let me know in the comments because I'm doing my best with the audio, but I am by no means an editor. So today I want to talk to you guys about inspiration, more specifically, inspiration that I found for Signs of the Times, but also I wanted to kind of have a little discussion about inspiration in a more general sense for creatives, mostly because all of the content that I see online geared towards this are paid classes by people who understandably are very talented, but I don't think necessarily understand what the concept of inspiration is, or that there's not one right way to find inspiration for an idea. I think what I'm trying to say in like two nice of words is that a lot of people try to profit personally off the idea that an individual artist, creative, whoever they are, is doing inspiration wrong and needs to go through a particular process. And I've always hated that idea. I think that everybody's individual brain chemistry and the way that their brain works is very unique, and you need to gear it towards yourself and what you identify with. So I guess this will be one example of how I, as a creative person, took inspiration from other games and even other areas outside of the genre of games entirely to come up with the idea for Signs of the Times. And then I also want to discuss a little bit about where I seek inspiration, where you might find inspiration that's helpful, and some ways to kind of jumpstart that creativity that is directly applicable to your situation without being too specific. So, one of the main ways I personally end up getting inspiration for creative ideas or projects is just going about my life the way that I naturally do, which is being a very curious person, kind of getting my hands in a lot of different things, trying new things, going out and exploring. Basically, I expose myself to as much stuff as I can to get ideas and hopefully generate some brainstorm power. I don't even know if this microphone is working or not, but we're doing our best. And it looks cute.
And literally style over substance, I guess.
Now, before I ever personally conceived of the idea for Signs of the Times, I was super deep in a rabbit hole playing solo journaling games by independent game devs on each.io. I'm definitely mispronouncing that name. Don't say it the way that I say it. This website is very important to the indie gaming community, both board games and video games alike, and I still sound like a fucknut. Please don't repeat what I said, but you know what I'm referencing. Okay, thank you. And I came across this game. It is called The Unnaturalist by Donnie Dynamo. It's on that website. I'll link it in the description below so you can find it too. Essentially, the game is a solo journaling RPG where you are playing as a scientific researcher that gets sent alone to a remote part of this jungle that nobody's explored before. And your job is to explain scientifically all these different weird phenomenon that you're coming across. But the farther that you go out and the more you explore, the more you realize that there may be something profoundly unscientific. The more you realize that there may be something profoundly unscientific getting in the way of this process and potentially even posing a risk to your life and your safety. One of the things that so floored me about this game was how fantastic the very, very basic game design was in combination with the theming of the game and what the purpose of the game was supposed to be and the world and story that they were building. Donnie Dynamo, when designing The Unnaturalist, was thinking about the headspace of a person who is a really, really hardcore scientist, profoundly believes, hi flower, profoundly believes in the scientific method, research and principles, academia in general, and that person having to confront the absolute randomness that they're coming across. The game functions on, I believe, a 4x4 or 6x6 grid of some kind, and you're moving randomly around the map and you come across all these different phenomenon and report on them. And some of them are a little bit more dangerous than others, but it's this sort of random maneuvering through this journey as a scientist that really brings you back to that mental state of this person who wants so hard to believe in everything they've built their life and career on, while also having to directly confront physical evidence they see and hear with their own eyes and ears that contradicts everything that they know and understand as a person. And ultimately, you can either go crazy and go insane or potentially like die in the woods or whatever, or you can end up succeeding on your mission and coming up with some sort of scientific paper to produce at the end of the journey. And either way, I think that it fits so well. I just really found myself gravitating towards this concept of a scientist being forced to confront the limits of their own belief system. Science is evidence based, but it also is a functional human philosophy and ideology. So it makes this person question, like, hey, what have I really learned? What do I know about the world around me? And in Signs of the Times, I think my goal was to sort of flip that context on its head because I love the idea of playing with the concept of belief in the scientific field. I have a lot of personal experience, by flower, and I thought, as someone who has a lot more experience in the spirituality realm that is profoundly unscientific, that it would be fun to explore what that really fervent belief looks like from a different worldview. So, in Signs of the Times, the game design is inspired by the Unnaturalist in that it follows that same randomness. I employed the grid mechanic with some elaboration that fit better with the theming. And I wanted people who play Signs of the Times to question and think on that fervent belief. What does it mean to have faith in something? What does it mean to believe what you've seen before, what's been presented before you? And how do you survive when that directly comes into contradiction with reality, especially when you're an unscientific person, somebody who isn't well educated or doesn't know the reality of the world around them, and how dangerous that process can be for that individual and other people around them. And because I'm obsessed, the Unnaturalist was not the only game that I was playing, and that game is Dialect, which is fantastic, and I would recommend to literally anybody that likes RPGs. But it's also very weird in the genre of RPG, so let's talk about it a little bit. So, as you can see on the cover here, it self describes as a game about language and how it dies. But to explain the basic game mechanics to you, how that actually functions in gameplay looks like slowly but surely developing a language word by word in the confines of individual like roleplay interactions between the people playing together and their characters. And you use this deck to pull out a bunch of different challenges or specific circumstances where a word might be created. And your characters are supposed to exist in isolation, somewhere like maybe a Mars colony or a post apocalyptic world where they think they're the only people left alive. And language starts changing in those environments. There's no combat, there is conflict, but it's not like you're physically fighting or rolling dice or anything like that, crunching numbers. It's very, very driven and directed by the group that you're playing with, the characters that you choose to play in the end, and the story that you all create together. So what ended up happening was we would create these crazy stories, these like really interesting, fascinating stories of these people pushed to the brink, like absolutely isolated, lonely, miserable in the worst parts of the world. And we told a story about how they survived and they experienced the world through the language that they created, which is literally the purpose of the game and what these wonderful creators and designers were trying to teach us. I could not get over that sensation of the mythic storytelling device and how essentially the whole game design of Dialect is orienting you around creating that story in the gamified way. And I found myself so moved and just having so much fun, like playing in that space of human struggle and what that would look like once that struggle was removed. So, when it came time to start writing the game book for Signs of the Times, I really knew that one of the most important aspects of this that I wanted to nail was that intimate sensation of what it would feel like to be a part of that human story as crazier and more elaborate things that make less and less sense start happening to these characters. Fundamentally, it's a story about making a religious pilgrimage, but in the process of that, the characters go from being scorned, isolated, not believed, nobody is interested in what they're trying to sell, to people that are actually gaining followers, convincing people that they know what they're talking about, and really performing miracles in a way that people haven't seen in years. And I wanted to think about what the process would be like if we essentially gamified the experience of making a holy text. Whatever religious book you read, whatever you follow, whatever you pick up, there are some profoundly confusing stories that sound too good to be true that nevertheless people believe. People believe that Jesus walked on water. And who am I to scorn that belief? It's not like I was there. You know what I mean? I don't fucking know. But all that I'm trying to say is people, human people, wrote and recorded under God's direction, supposedly, all of these holy texts and holy writings and descriptions of what people were doing thousands of years ago. And I wanted to make the game that was the story of how people end up in the Bible as prophets, as leaders, as gods or saints or, deities or whatever you want to consider them to be. How do you go from being a normal person that nobody believes to being deified or believed in so strongly that people will throw anything and everything away? That's their faith. That's their belief. That's the one thing that they hold on to. So, in the same vein that Dialect ended up creating this really unique, intimate, I keep using that word, but very intimate experience around the human suffering and what human behaviors end up resulting from human struggle, I wanted to put that same kind of logic behind a different theme and setting and see what happens when you put a kettle cooker kind of pressure on people that have really, really fervent belief. If Dialect is a game about how languages are created and they die, then Signs of the Times is a game about belief and how it is born. And fortunately for us game players, the answer to both sets of those questions is a lot of drama in between. The last game I want to talk to you guys about, I literally cannot recommend enough. I'm going to be exceptionally biased because this is literally one of my favorite games of all time. Like, I don't care. I will fight anybody that dislikes this game, which is really ironic because I actually hated this game the first time I picked it up. And that game is World of Horror, which you can get on Steam. It is a video game by an indie dev, not a board game, but I will explain myself, I promise. World of Horror is a very retro style adventure point and click RPG type thing. It's really hard to describe. It's very similar to games that would come out in the 20th century before we had like superpower machines and everything like that. It's definitely text based adventure. And the context or the story that is being told is that you are an isolated little high school student in this faraway Japanese town that's being attacked by eldritch terrors and is slowly being influenced and manipulated and corrupted into something horrible and evil. And this character goes and explores all these different mysteries and ghosts and monsters that are popping up around town, ultimately in the hopes that they are going to be able to defeat the eldritch god that is trying to destroy their home. And I will be very upfront with you because like I said, cannot recommend this game enough. But if you pick this up for the first time, you are going to be profoundly frustrated as a player. And the reason I say that is because the UI is very overwhelming. It's all these different buttons with symbols you don't even understand. Like sometimes you're clicking on things, you don't know what you're doing. What often ends up happening as a first time player, which is what happened to me, is that it's a very hard game and you're managing a lot of different resources. And oftentimes it feels like the game is kind of punishing you arbitrarily based on the RNG rolls. And it just gets annoying to lose. Like so profoundly bad. It's really easy to lose a game of World of Horror within the first of the 5 mysteries that you're supposed to solve before you even get to like the full bad Eldritch Terror big bad boss. You're trying to preserve your physical health, which is very common in RPGs, but you're also dealing with a sanity meter that gets lower and lower on top of a doom meter which goes to progress how far the Eldritch God is in corrupting your town. So you have 3 potential death meters to contend with, not the average 2. And so many of the little like situations that pop up in terms of messing with your stats day to day, any of the stuff like the overall mysteries really frames it as this poor character, this child essentially, because they're a teenager, being profoundly isolated and tormented by this experience of being the only person that knows what's really going on in this world. And they don't even get to like really know what's going on the entire time, because a lot of the mysteries get the Junji Ito style explanation of like, we don't really know what's going on here. We kind of think we know what's going on here. Very common in cosmic horror, which is the main theming, but it just feels very creepy and unsettling and upsetting because you as a player barely know how to play the game the first time you pick it up, and it's super obvious the only person who understands that there's something really dangerous going on, which is your character that you're playing, is profoundly ill equipped to actually take care of the problem. The fun of World of Horror does not come from winning the game over and over and over again. I have literally been playing this game for probably like 4 years. I may be wrong about the timing, but I've been playing it since it was a beta, and I still don't win like most of the time. And I've had to understand that the fun of that game is the game design meta contextually creating the same struggle that the character is experiencing in the player and making them quote unquote suffer together in a capacity where you end up very emotionally connected to this story and these people that are struggling to survive through an eldritch god taking over. And ultimately, it almost feels like you're left in a very toxic, isolating relationship with this one character that's going slowly insane, and you're the only person that can help them get to where they need to go, even though they're going insane, but also the only person that can fix everything.
It's a lot. It's a lot emotionally.
It is a brutal and very fun experience. And when I finally ended up sitting down to write more of the bulk of the game book for Signs of the Times, the thing that I knew that I wanted to carry over more than anything from World of Horror was that sensation of quote unquote being in this together for the player and the actual character that they're embodying, and that player being forced to understand how difficult of a lifestyle that character really lives through the explicit game design. The truth of the matter is, if you play Signs of the Times, you are not guaranteed to win by any means. But the point is that whether or not you win, you will still have told an amazing story. As much as people make it out to be very, very difficult to find inspiration for your projects, I oftentimes find for me personally that I have the opposite problem, which is that I have too many ideas and not enough time to finish them. So I'd love to share with you guys some of my experiences and how I like generate ideas and get some fresh material out there when I'm feeling a little burnt out. As you guys know, I am moving to Mexico very soon, which is super exciting and going to be a whole big new journey and process that probably will come with a whole host of new inspirations that I'm so excited for.
Mexico City is one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen photographs of in terms of like the art, the design, the architecture, the nature that they prioritize.
It's just like really beautiful, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the stuff there. But of course, I'm leaving America and I'm leaving my home. I've lived in the state that I've lived in my whole life, and there were a lot of things that I grew up around that were really important to me, important to my experience growing up and learning and understanding who I was, but also in terms of inspiration and becoming the kind of creative that I wanted to be. I did a quick vlog-ish type of thing, except it's like no sounds and no nothing and me looking really weird and like not knowing how to film myself because I was in a museum. But I went to a museum that I have loved ever since I was a child. I have a fervent special interest in prehistoric animals, and I have ever since I was little. And they had this amazing dinosaur display that they actually used to shove in the basement that they now put upstairs, which I'm sure I'll be showing footage of or whatever. And it was such a healing trip for me. For one thing, because obviously we're always taught, like, hey, it's weird to just like go out and be in public by yourself. And it was really fun for me to just be able to explore the museum alone as an autistic person. Also, it was really refreshing for me because again, as an autistic person, as a neurodivergent person, I tend to prefer things that are same, finding pattern recognition, etc. And this museum was a really wonderful little stop for me because they have their little rotating collection. Then they also have the same exhibits that they've always had since I was little. And it gives me the chance to sort of reprocess things that I've already learned go over it again if I want to go over it again, maybe see it from a new angle that I haven't considered before, while also getting some new inspiration and input at the same time. I felt really healed and relieved after that experience because it was filling up that tank again that I had been depleting in the process of writing and rewriting the game book for playtesting and edits. So, my first tip for everybody, which I think that people oftentimes forget because we get very focused and fixated, understandably, when we're trying to put creative output into the world, is seek inspiration far outside the confines of wherever you are trying to dig really deep for ideas. So for me, what that looked like was I'm having a really rough time editing this game book right now for playtesting. I need something refreshing and new, but also something familiar. So I went to this museum and I looked at paintings of fish and animals and birds and shit. And I looked at dinosaur bones and rocks. Is that directly correlated to Signs of the Times? Probably not. But did it give me inspiration in terms of different game design ideas, potential applications for microscopic game design details for this game that I'm trying to edit and work on, and ideas that potentially even have adaptability to be maneuvered and twisted and changed into different creative projects entirely? The more adaptable your ideas are, the more that you're going to be able to get use out of them. If you are a novel writer, for example, what was the last movie that you watched that you genuinely thought to yourself, I could have written that better? And why did you think that? And what was the lesson from that thought process that led you to, okay, this could have been done better? If there's anything ADHD has taught me, it is that yes, I can connect a very clear and concrete line between something like fucking Cadbury eggs and the Russian Revolution. My second tip for getting inspiration is writing everything down, which is something that everybody recommends. So I'm definitely not alone in that club. But I take it to kind of an extreme personally. And what I mean is, I have post it notes beside my bed, like literally for when I'm sleeping. I will sometimes wake up from a dead sleep and go and grab for a pen and the pad. The idea is I have impermanent ideas that are just stuck everywhere. And it's not like a whole mess, they're just on my nightstand or whatever, but I accumulate them in a little pile. And then I give myself 30 minutes to an hour every week to go through the ideas that I had and keep the ones that make sense or are good and throw away the ones that don't and let them go. And I think that there's something helpful about post its for me specifically for my brain chemistry in that it's impermanent. So it's not so serious like a notebook where if I write ideas down and then scratch it out, it makes me upset. I can throw it away and like not be bogged down by a bunch of notes and ideas that don't make sense or aren't useful to me anymore. You need to get more comfortable with writing down your fleeting thoughts. Some of those ideas are going to be big epiphanies where it just like hits you like all at once, and then other ideas you're going to have to put together and piece together like a puzzle, understanding, oh, my brain was subconsciously like putting these concepts together, and this is all a theme that fits in this one box. Write everything down, have it there for reference in the future, keep stuff that you want, and throw away the shit that you don't, and don't worry about it anymore. But when you come upon your brain freeze, the moment where you're like, I can't figure out what inspiration I need, you go back to this reservoir and put together a puzzle of all these different disparate ideas that fit under the same umbrella. Third tip is not going to be revolutionary either. I'm sure that you've seen this or heard this somewhere, and this is fundamentally just a repackaging of the idea that you cannot work until you're dead. But creative output is work, and it requires a reserve of energy, like I mentioned before, and oftentimes a reserve of ideas. And what I see a lot of people do when they're like me and have the type of brain that fixates really hard and struggles to get off of something until that project is finished, whatever that looks like for them, what oftentimes gets lost in that process is remembering that you need to take inspiration in to produce something out. You really need to make sure that you are both taking in art and creating art at a balanced rate so that you are not exhausting yourself and burning yourself out and, quite frankly, expecting superhuman abilities from yourself that are not possible, and like becoming resentful of yourself when you are creative and smart and capable. And last but certainly not least, This is not a tip, but it is true. People are trying to sell you courses, and you do not need to pay somebody to teach you where to get ideas from. A lot of times, it just takes being patient and waiting for the right thing to come along instead of literally trying to force a square peg into a round hole. I hope that this was interesting or helpful. I hope it generated some ideas for you. I hope it oriented you towards some really exciting new games, hopefully, because I'm talking about all the things that I enjoy. And most importantly, I hope that that made you interested in Signs of the Times. If you would like to playtest, we have a new edition that is edited and has been updated. We're getting a lot of positive feedback so far, which makes me really excited as a designer. And you're always welcome to reach out at rockmakergames@hotmail.com. Otherwise, I really, really hope that you find the inspiration that you're looking for. It's always in the weirdest corners. And I know, I feel for y'all that are in the trenches with like what is essentially artist block. I refer to it as writer's block a lot because that's my preferred medium. But it's hard and you are not broken. You just need to maybe change the balance of the way that you're working and doing things a little bit. And I believe in you and I cannot wait to see what you create, okay? Put yourself out there. I'm excited. I want to see. I want to see me. I want to see. Thank you so much for watching. Me and my tiny mic and my pimple cream and my awkward lighting and whatever's going on here. I really appreciate you. You can always like and comment and subscribe and follow along for more details on the Mexico move, which is going to be very exciting, and then starting up a game company and publishing this game in a new country and online and all this different exciting stuff. And if you don't want to join, that is totally cool too. And I just sincerely hope that you're having a better day than you're expecting to have. Be well, my friends, and I will talk to you soon.